If you think the only way to benefit from cannabis is to get high, you're really missing the bigger picture. In fact, some of the most powerful benefits of cannabis come when you're not high at all. Today, I'm going to show you some ways that cannabis can support your body. Things like your mood, your emotions, your focus, your sleep, all without getting intoxicated. Hi, I'm Tabitha Fritz. I'm an intentional cannabis educator, and I'm the founder of Level Up. I've worked with hundreds of people who want to use cannabis to feel better, to function better, and to be more aligned, all without having to feel intoxicated or feel like they're out of control. So this video is grounded in that work, and it also draws from my course called 5 Dimensions of a Cannabis Workshop. So I'll be using the framework that I used in that course for this video. Today, we're going to cover 3 main topics. Number 1, why getting high is not necessary for therapeutic benefit. It is, of course, a valid outcome of cannabis consumption, but it is not necessarily one that you need in order to get the therapeutic benefit out of cannabis that you might be looking for. Number 2, we'll talk about how cannabis can support your life in different ways without intoxication. So the framework that I will present will cover 5 different areas of life in which you can use cannabis without getting intoxicated. You can, of course, get intoxicated if you want to, but you don't have to. And the third thing that we will talk about is how you can start to experiment with intentional, non-intoxicating use for yourself. So with that being said, let's get into it. Okay, let's start with a reframe about how we think about cannabis and even approach it as something that we consume, right? So often when we think about weed, we just think about getting high, but you do not have to become intoxicated or even altered in order to consume cannabis and have it impact you in very therapeutic ways. In fact, your endocannabinoid system is designed to interact with many different types of molecules, not just THC. Your body naturally produces molecules that interact with your endocannabinoid system naturally. So we can introduce other cannabinoids called phytocannabinoids when they're produced by light in the cannabis plant into your body and have it impact your endocannabinoid system as well. Now, THC, yes, is the molecule that we associate with getting high or becoming altered or intoxicated. It does produce that outcome, certainly, right? And if you've consumed it, you probably know that. You can get high if you have the right amount of THC. But most of the other molecules, with some small exceptions, in the cannabis plant are non-intoxicating. They do not alter you in terms of, how intoxicated you are. You will obviously, your body's going to be altered, but you're not going to have that like euphoric high that you get with THC. And even if you are consuming THC, you can really titrate your dose to get the benefits that you're looking for without necessarily becoming intoxicated or getting high, right? It's all about finding the right sweet spot that's still going to activate your endocannabinoid system and give you some effects and give you some therapeutic effects, but you're not going to get high from it because you're not consuming that much THC. Now, obviously, that's not as much of a danger with the other cannabinoids because you're not going to get high from CBD. Now, I say that there are occasions. And there are potentially some people's metabolisms that can convert CBD into THC. I don't think that we know a lot about it, but I have read some incidences of that happening. And in fact, I had a friend who had never consumed cannabis before, and she had some health issues. And so I gave her some CBD gummies to try. And she told me she felt high for 2 days after she ate, like a normal dose of a CBD gummy. So potentially, was it psychosomatic? Obviously, yes. Like there's a large potential for that to have been at least somewhat psychosomatic. But I do also think that, potentially the CBD could have converted some portion of it to THC. And she was a consumer who was not familiar with THC at all, not used to the headspace. So I don't know that she knew what she was looking for. But that being said, I have heard of other instances in which CBD converts to THC in a user. So I don't know if that's real. I don't know if that's true. I've heard of it. I'm just sharing the information that I've heard with you so that you can make your own choices and decisions. But in general, you're not going to get high or intoxicated from CBD or CBG or some of the other cannabinoids that are not THC. Now, that being said, let me just mention CBN, which is often used for sleep to help induce sleepiness in the consumer. And that is about 1/10 as intoxicating as THC. So if you normally get high from 10 milligrams of THC, you could potentially get high from 100 milligrams or so of CBN. You'd also fall asleep, probably. It doesn't induce sleep in every consumer, but in some consumers, it certainly does seem to help induce some kind of sleepiness. So that being said, lower doses of cannabinoids can definitely still activate your system without, altering you excessively. Now, like I said before, the framework for this video is based on the framework for my course called 5 Dimensions of a Cannabis Experience. And the 5 dimensions of the cannabis experience in that course are sort of the 5 areas of life that we engage in as humans on this planet. So those would be physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and social. Okay, those are the 5 dimensions that we engage with in general as humans on this planet, the planet of Earth. Okay, so let's talk about them in order and talk about how cannabis can provide benefits for each one of those dimensions without getting high. So we'll start with the physical dimension, right? Now, small doses of cannabis, small doses of THC can certainly help with things like sleep or pain for a lot of people. Other cannabinoids such as CBD or CBG can help to reduce inflammation in the consumer's body if you have high levels of inflammation in the body. Pain relief, we know THC often helps with pain relief, right? So, and actually what we've seen, and so this is more anecdotal. So I've worked with many cannabis consumers over the years. Some of them are patients. Some of them are just looking for therapeutic use. Some of them are just looking for recreational use. So I am familiar with lots of different kinds of outcomes. So people who are consuming cannabis for pain, one thing that we've found is that at least a small amount of THC does seem to be required to sort of activate the CBD. So I've noticed a lot of people who say, oh, I have pain or I need to sleep. I'm just going to take CBD because I know that it's non-intoxicating. And that is a strategy. But CBD is not the most effective cannabinoid for either pain or sleep. In fact, it's barely effective for those two things unless your pain is caused by inflammation, right? Like ongoing inflammation over time, in which case CBD can certainly help reduce that inflammation and cut down on the pain that's coming from it. But if the pain is acute, if it is from something that is not inflammation, CBD is going to do very, very little to actually help that person deal with their pain. So in that case, a bit of THC is going to activate the endocannabinoid system and start those pain receptors modulating downward. So a small amount of THC would be necessary for treating pain for most people. Now, when we think about sleep, which is another very common use of cannabis for the physical dimension, it's kind of the same story. So you want to have a bit of THC or CBN, which is a derivative of THC, to help you fall asleep initially. But if you're too high, it's really going to impact your ability to fall asleep. It will make it more difficult to fall asleep. And B, it's going to affect your REM sleep cycle. So when you've consumed a larger dose of THC, it affects your REM sleep cycle and you do not go as deep into sleep. So your sleep is generally not as restful if you have consumed more THC than is the ideal dose for you to fall asleep. Okay, so again, if you're using cannabis along the physical dimension to improve things like sleep or pain, you actually don't want to get too high because that could very well negatively impact the outcome of your experience and make it more challenging for you to get the effects that you're looking for. Okay, so that's the physical dimension. Now, if we think about the mental dimension, we can think about it specifically about focus and motivation. Now, I have ADHD. I know that a lot of people have ADHD. I have been diagnosed by doctors over the years. I've tried many different medications. I've tried many different therapies. I know sort of what tools work well for me. I have my own behavioral modifications. I have, my working space set up in a certain way and my work day set up in a certain way that really helps me maintain my focus and my ability to get things done and my productivity. But cannabis can absolutely help with that as well. And a big part of that is because a little bit of THC, a microdose of THC, can actually improve your dopamine function. So frequently for people with ADHD or people without even ADHD, it can be difficult to get motivated or get started on something because you potentially lack the dopamine that helps you get motivated to get going, right? It becomes very challenging to even get started because you're just like overwhelmed and kind of bored even thinking about doing it. So intentionally microdosing THC, using a little bit of THC, can actually activate the dopamine within your system and give you a little boost of motivation and focus to get things done. Now, again, if you consume too much and you're too high, you can forget about it. You're not getting any work done this afternoon at all, right? So it is absolutely about being very intentional and dialing in your dose. I would recommend you start with a microdose for something like this. So if you're inhaling, it's one puff off of a balanced 1-to-1 THC CBD ratio dried bud or vape pen. Or if you're consuming an edible, start with 1 to 2 milligrams of THC. Add in a little CBD for the balance as well. Because if you're too high, your attention is going to wander and you're not going to have any mental clarity at all, right? You're going to be like off in the clouds thinking about other things. So this is why actually not getting high is very important for this purpose along the mental dimension. Now, the next dimension we can talk about is actually the emotional dimension. Now, this is a big one, right? Because many people use cannabis to treat their mood. And for instance, I get home from work and I'm like, you know what? Let me just go have a little bowl outside real quick, a quick puff. And now I feel relaxed. Now I feel better. My mood is uplifted. I'm happier. But if I get high and I am now like totally intoxicated and I can't come back in and connect with my family or make dinner or do all of the other things that I was going to do this afternoon, then my mood's actually probably going to suffer a bit because of that. And I'm going to feel worse than I was before because I am no longer as regulated and as happy as I was, and I'm not getting things done. So there's a difference between emotions and moods, right? Certainly. So like when I got home in that example, I was feeling stressed. But if I was feeling anxious, perhaps I might not want to consume any THC at all because THC can certainly exacerbate anxiety, right? In that case, I might consume some CBD or some CBG only and try to avoid exacerbating my anxiety and making it worse. A lot of it is about understanding where you're at and what's going to work for you. And that's what we always say about intentional cannabis consumption, right? It's unique to every consumer and every consumption experience because you are different in every consumption experience. The day that you just had is different from the day that you had yesterday, right? So the thing that you're going to need to relax and bring your mood down when you get home is going to be a bit different than the thing that you needed yesterday. That's why it's beneficial to be intentional about your consumption, to think about what is the outcome that I'm going for. So then you have an intentional consumption, you're able to regulate your mood and you're not pushed into like this overwhelm or an overwhelming experience because you consumed too much. That's what being intentional is about. In fact, we don't want to get too high because that's less intentional and makes it more challenging to actually get at the outcome that we're seeking. So the fourth dimension of human life on this planet, according to me, is the spiritual dimension, right? Now, this means different things to different people. Obviously, spirituality is a very personal and unique thing. For some people, that means, an organized religion that they participate in. For other people, that means that you have a connection to God or source or the universe or your higher self or your guides or, whatever is outside of you. And for other people, that means that you have a connection to other people who are here existing on earth, right? Like that can be a very spiritual thing for some people to be connected to others or connected to yourself, right? So the spiritual dimension certainly means different things to different people. And I would never want to assume that I know what spirituality is for you. However, that being said, cannabis can enhance many spiritual practices because it enables one to change one's perspective and see things in a different way but that only works if you can stay present in the moment, right? So if you've consumed a large amount of THC, it can be very difficult to stay present and grounded in the moment. You really might be flying off into the ether, into a totally different dimension, into a totally different, experience than a grounded, spiritually focused growth experience, let's say, right? So in other words, you don't want to be too high if you're using cannabis for a spiritual practice like meditation or prayer or journaling or yoga or, whatever it might be for you. Using too much THC can fragment the connection that you have with yourself or your higher self or whatever it is, right? So spirituality is about a connection with something bigger than is just your physical being, right? And so if you're too high and you're not able to stay focused in the moment, then that connection can be very difficult to maintain, right? So it's about finding the dose that allows you to stay present. Presence is the key here. Being in the moment and being present and being able to sit and focus and stay there while you're engaging in whatever your spiritual practice is and allowing the insights to come down to you, right? So again, this is one of those occasions actually in which you don't want to be so high if that's your intention, right? Is to engage in a spiritual practice, especially if it's a thing that you're doing like meditation or like journaling. Now, there are different kinds of spiritual practices, and one might argue that going for a walk in the woods is an incredibly spiritual activity, and I would agree. Yes, it is. And if that's the spiritual activity that you're engaging in, perhaps you do want to be higher because your physical body's going to be moving and you're going to, feel more comfortable because you're out in nature or whatever it is. This is about you thinking about what works for you ahead of time and then intentionally consuming the dose and the product that's going to work for you to achieve that outcome, to find that effect, if that's what you're looking for, right? So again, regardless of the dimension in which we're consuming cannabis, it's all about intention. It's all about thinking about the outcome we're seeking before we get there. And then the fifth dimension that I would mention is the social dimension, right? And this, of course, is where we are connected with other people. And we very traditionally think of alcohol as a social lubricant. In fact, it's called that frequently by many people, a social lubricant, right? Because you're feeling a little stiff or a little on edge or a little nervous about interacting with people, like at a party or an event or whatever. You have a drink and then suddenly you feel less anxious about interacting with other people. Well, cannabis can be used in a very similar way, right? It can help you open up your connection. If you're familiar, especially if you're familiar with the effects of cannabis, it can absolutely make you feel more relaxed. It can make you feel happier. It can make you feel lighter. But if you get too high, it's probably going to shut down your desire to connect with other people at all. You're just going to want to withdraw. You're going to want to go someplace that's comfortable and quiet so you can sit on a couch by yourself and eat some food and hopefully drink some water and then get yourself back together, right? It's going to shut down your desire to be social and to communicate. But if you have the right amount, it will help you actually feel grounded and open and able to connect with all of the people around you rather than feeling checked out because, you've consumed too much and you're not feeling comfortable anymore and you got to get out of here and go somewhere where you feel better. So like I've said several times throughout this video, it really all just comes down to intentionality. It all comes down to you being intentional about the reason that you're consuming cannabis, the outcome that you're looking for from the experience, and the product and dosing choices that you're going to make as a result of that intention. That alignment, the alignment between your intention, the outcome, and the products chosen, that's what we're looking for, right? You want those three things to be aligned, and then it's more likely that you're going to have the experience that you're looking for, a positive, constructive experience with cannabis that actually improves your life and improves the quality of your life and allows you to use cannabis in a therapeutic way. Here's a little integration tip that you can use. All right. So the next time that you're going to consume cannabis, I want you to ask yourself these three questions. Number one, what area of my life am I trying to support right now? Okay, so that's going to get at your intention. What area of your life are you trying to support right now? What is your intention for consuming? What are you trying to, you can think of it in the 5 dimensions. Are you trying to support your physical being, mental being, emotional being, spiritual being, social being? What part of your life are you trying to support? And then you can get more specific and granular. Okay, it's my, emotional body that I want to support right now. And I recognize that I'm having some challenges with mood. So I'm going to intentionally use cannabis to hopefully improve my mood and make myself feel better so that I have a better quality of life. Okay, so there, number 1, that's my support. Number 2, second question that you're going to ask is, what would the minimum effective dose for that outcome be? Right? So if that's the thing that I want to do and I want to support my mood, I'm going to say to myself, okay, what's the minimum effective dose for me to do that? So if I'm using my 1 hitter, let's say, it's probably going to be 2 puffs on my 1 hitter, not 1. All right. Like I know 1's not going to do much for me. So, but 2 would be my minimally effective dose, I expect. Or if I was consuming an edible, just for mood, I would probably take 50 to 100 milligrams of THC. I know that's way more than most people take. I'm not recommending that you take that. I'm just trying to stay honest with what I consume. And that is because I have some digestive enzyme issues. And some people do. Some people, they'll consume edibles and will feel nothing. They can consume hundreds of milligrams of THC and feel nothing. There are a few reasons for that. I actually could explain that in another video. I'm going to write that down right now, in fact. Post-it note here where I keep ideas for videos. Thanks for being here for my ideation process. Okay, so you've identified the area of life that you're trying to support. You've identified the minimum effective dose that should potentially work for you. And then the third thing that you want to ask yourself is, what would feeling aligned in this moment, in this experience, actually look like for me? Like what would that look like for me? What would it look like for me to support my body, for me to have the outcome that I desire without feeling too intoxicated or too high? And what does that alignment look like? Like, what are the things that I'm trying to align here in order to get together, right? And then, so once you've asked yourself those 3 questions, you want to keep a journal of your experiences, right? I always talk about the intentional consumption journal. It's a free tool. You can download it in the description. It's in the description of all the videos. You could also just use a notebook. Honestly, just get a blank notebook, and you're going to write on each page, you're going to write, the date, how I was feeling before I consumed, what I chose to consume. And then you can actually write physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, social in there. And then, give yourself a date or whatever. And then write down, here's how this affected me in each of these 5 dimensions. You keep track of these things with different consumption experiences. And then over time, you start to build your own alignment map. You begin to understand what works for you, what helps you feel aligned, what helps you feel good, what doesn't work for you, what didn't work for certain things. And when you want to, consume a product that affects you in the physical dimension, I've got my alignment map. I know what works for me. I know what's going to help me. If I want something that's going to affect me, maybe I need to focus or I need to be a little bit more productive. Now I can go back to my notes. I can say, okay, what helped me on the mental dimension? And now I know. Right? When you keep track of your experiences and you keep track of how different products have affected you, you are building this compendium of resources for yourself in the future that you can now use to make the most aligned choices for you. All right. And that's what we're trying to do here. Everybody needs to be able to make the right choices for them because every single one of us is unique. Our body's needs are unique. The way that our body interacts with cannabis is going to be unique. So you are best off having a good idea about how cannabis is going to work for you so that you can use that information to make your best choices about consumption in the future. Now, I, have mentioned the course several times. So if this is something that you're interested in exploring more deeply, you can, of course, take a look at my 5 Dimensions of a Cannabis Experience workshop. I've put a link to it in the description. It goes into more depth about each of the 5 dimensions and the ways that you could use cannabis in those 5 dimensions with intention, different ways that people have used cannabis as a tool for evolution and growth and learning and their own self-development along each of those dimensions. And there are some additional tools and resources in there for you to keep track of your own intentional consumption. So, even more things for you to make better decisions for yourself in the future. As we're closing this video, I just want you to remember that your body already knows what alignment feels like, right? Like your body knows what alignment feels like. You may have forgotten, but cannabis can be a tool that helps you remember. Cannabis can be a tool when it's used intentionally that helps you listen with more clarity to your body so that you can hear, maybe not with your ears, maybe with something else, but you can perceive, maybe is a better word than hear, what it is that your body needs in order to be fulfilled and perfectly aligned. Because like I said, each one of us is unique. Each one of us is a unique consumer with our own needs and things that are important to us and outcomes that we're looking for. So we need to be able to consume cannabis in a way that isn't just about getting high, but actually allows us to capture the benefits of the plant and capture all of the benefits across the multidimensional aspects of being human, whether that's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, or social, right? Cannabis can absolutely help you listen more closely to what your body and to what your experience is telling you. I will see you in the next one.